Hello and welcome to the Eyeballs. Last Minute Politics featuring
We're talking about leftist infighting, and that is how you start leftist infighting.
Oh, I like thought. You see how you feel about. All right, we're just jumping out there. How you probably now I think feel about Peter Coffin is how I am gradually feeling about Thought Slime, and talking about two people who fucking hate each other. God damn,
that fascinates me because Thought Slime is another one where I have a similar reaction to them as I do Peter Coffin, where I'm like,
they're a bit smarmy, and a lot of people don't like it.
Okay, yes, remove all your bullshit, and I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but you say it in a way that makes me think you're an asshole, and I'm supposed to be on your side. Why?
You used a different S word than smarmy. Mine is smart. What did you use?
Sardonic. They are blatantly and upfront sardonic. It's what every high schooler leans into when they learn irony isn't enough or is too hard to do.
Well, that's kind of, if you go under, this episode is not discussing we're not here to tone police how you make your leftist internet content, but you can almost argue that, okay, when I was getting into ContraPoints way back when they were like quasi-socialist and now they're just a straight up lib, back when they were like edgy and like talking about issues and getting me actually further left and further towards like reading the theory and like, what does Lenin actually have to say? Like, when I was getting in there, they made a point that I love where they're like, look, you can get out there and you can act like the crazy beardo guy who's yelling about Marx or whatever, or you got to be kind of cool. That like the way you present the content attracts certain randos who aren't already into the thing, and there may or may not, like, I don't know if it's intentional or not. Maybe he's like, well, teens act and talk like this, and they may be attracted to the amount of an asshole I am. And it's like, I don't know, maybe.
True. And like, it very well could be, I am not the target audience for Peter Coffin and Thought Slime, which is fine. But as you've bemoaned, there aren't that many people talking about this stuff that either are like, they do the research and they learn about it and their stuff evolves, or they turn out to just be hustlers, because there are hustlers on the left. And I don't mean work that hustle, give me that dollar. I mean, they genuinely do not give a shit about anything of the cause. This is just where the eyeballs and money is.
That's where you start using the word grift.
That was the word, not hustle. I'm sorry. I respect the hustle. I do not respect the grift.
Like, you don't have to become Jimmy Dore, who is a previous guy who would get on and was like left considered, and they're like, oh, this radical leftist, and now he's realized that he can make a shit ton of money saying anti-vax things, so that's his whole deal now, because he gets a bunch of money off it. And it's like, I understand you got to pay your bills, but like, fuck. No, come on. And it's just different levels of because it's that we're forced into there's an incentive structure in place in our social media and in our everyday lives everywhere, as long as you're living under the capitalist system, to behave in certain ways. And some people do. And I'm trying really hard to always acknowledge those fucking influences and do my best to resist them. That's why people end up acting like that, though. Like, that's what pushed I said Contra Slime. That's pushed ContraPoints farther to the lib side. Is they're like, well, I'm like really popular now and I'm making money. I'm getting invited to TED Talks, and they don't really want to hear about Marx and Lenin right now. I better tone that shit down. And it's not explicit. I'm sure no one walked up to them and was like, you better start shit talking socialism. Like, I'm sure no one said that directly, but you get the cues.
Can we take a moment to discuss the Envy video, because that's kind of what we're discussing, right?
I don't want to talk about it for a long time, but I would love to hear your thoughts.
My gut reaction is it's nowhere near as bad as what anyone says, and it fits right in line with what we just had on Bible study, in that it's the acknowledgement of these things that happen socially, treat them as if they are just an unconscious force that you cannot stop. All you can do is work with it. That was my takeaway. I'm actually greatly surprised at how upset people were over that video. I did not get lib shit from it at all. I got, oh yeah, this gets misattributed to us and that sucks, and that was a good breakdown of what is it and why.
I think I don't remember if we'd pressed record when I said when I had said this thing or not, But it's the difference between systemic and individual, and they seem to be conflagrated in that video, and that's what pisses some people off.
I don't think
Some
it was
people off.
conflagrated, but if you were the viewer who did get that impression, then yes, I see how that video could piss you off.
There's a difference between individually dealing with your personal feelings of like, damn, that motherfucker, like, of envy, versus the systemic structures that keep certain people in power and keep certain other people in power, and like trying to go, leftists are just jealous. Like, that's no.
All right. Well, you've got a bunch of text stuff, and I do want to get into
so much.
this. So
Did you introduce yourself?
I don't think I did. Hi, I'm Dragor, and I don't like how Peter Coffin says things, but I increasingly like the content of what he has to say.
That's really it. Like, don't follow his Twitter. It's just...
Oh my God, his Twitter, I had to turn that shit off. Oh, what an asshole.
I'm just sitting there, I'm like, you're right, Peter, but why are we talking to... Who are you tweeting at? Who is this person?
He has... Well, and that's his... That's the hustle, right? That's not necessarily the grift. That's the hustle of, you need to drive that engagement. This is his life, right?
Get the fuck on social media. He was previously had success on YouTube for making song parodies, and now it's like, now I'm a hardcore Marxist-Leninist talking about that online, and that's what my whole thing is. And would you believe it that the YouTube algorithm doesn't like put his videos in front of people anymore?
Le gasp.
Shocking.
Okay, I've done my intro. Let's get into...
So the only reason that we freaking mention Peter Coffin is because it's not that I love... That's why I bring up the parasocial thing at the beginning. It's not that, like, Peter Coffin's my favorite person and the only person I will trust for my news. But if you are looking... Our topic today is Nicaragua, and specifically this month's Nicaraguan election. I think it happened on the 7th, something like that. Maybe I'm thinking of our election day. But, like, this month, in November 2021, Nicaragua held a national presidential election. And trying to find any information on it is just miserable. You can go online and find the same copy-pasted, like if you look into the source, like if you find New York Times or Washington Post, your traditional Western media, you'll find the same non-source listed over and over, and the same non-claims completely unbacked up over and over and over again. And one of the only people... The reason I gravitated towards Coffin is because he did an episode on it, and he had been talking to not only the person interviewed in the, but a guy named Caleb Maupin, another person who the internet left considers neo-Hitler. They fucking hate.
I need to look more into this, because I've talked about the Black Socialists of America group, and they sent some critical stuff at him, and I don't other than they shared a picture of him sitting at a table with a white supremacist or something, and I'm like, okay. Well, one of my good friends has a picture in fursuit against a Trump sign. Can I get context, please? The picture alone doesn't work.
Are they debating the white supremacist, or are they like at the same barbecue for white supremacy? Like, you know what I mean? But the reason I bring up Maupin, he was in Nicaragua as a poll watcher at the polls, posting Twitter videos like, I'm here in Nicaragua and no one's killing anyone and we're all voting and everything's chill. So, like, trying to find direct sources is already difficult. Then trying to find English language direct sources is also difficult. Then you take into, this is where I start sounding like tinfoil hat, take up that, like, Twitter and social media and the general Western, like, they are not going to publish pro-Nicaragua takes for reasons that will become clear in my little brief history here. And there's accusations of, the people who were, like, pro-Sandinista on Twitter were, like, their accounts were deleted or they were blocked or they were censured. I mean, when I tweet about fucking Patreon, that shit gets, like, nothing. Like, it's, wow, I've gone from, like, 7 likes to 0 likes. So imagine that you're trying to talk, like, pro a place the U.S. doesn't like. It's not that conspiratorial to think, yeah, that was probably like taken down or at the least de-emphasized in the algorithm. So how the fuck do you find out what is actually going on in Nicaragua? I don't actually know, but this is the best I've got. Please don't take all of this whole spiel I'm about to go on as like, I know everything about Nicaragua, and the U.S. is evil all the time, and Nicaragua is God, and I love Ortega. He's my favorite. I don't give a shit about Ortega. He's the guy who currently he won the presidential election, but don't take this as like, Pepper loves the government of Nicaragua. I'm just trying to figure out what the fuck is happening.
Yeah, Pepper's done more research into this than I have, but even with the digging, I'm in a group. You've heard me talk about it here and there. There's a group across the country called Drinking Liberally, And I'm in a bunch of those chats, and that's my local Chicago group where we're all friends, we drink, and we also talk shit about politics. And I am definitely, especially after lockdown, way more to the left than the rest of them. But that's still good for me because I want to find out, like, all right, what do
Just
my
have them change it to drinking socially.
what do my more left lib friends think about some of this stuff? And I brought up the Nicaragua stuff, and they don't even have anything to say other than they're like, yeah, I heard there was some election troubles. And I'm like, all right, well, here's the main source that they used, and here's why it's horseshit. Do you know anything else? And no one knows anything. People far more informed than I am are like, well, you one-upped us on this one. We don't know shit.
Your two options are to fully buy into the U.S. and EU. And when I say the West, that's shorthand for U.S., Canada, and the EU, and a couple other people. Like, you either wholesale believe the media narrative that's given out because, damn, it is all exactly perfectly in lockstep and everyone says the exact same thing, or apparently you love Ortega and hate America. Like, there's somewhere between those two is reality. And I want to discover it. So here's my brief history of Nicaragua. And this is, okay, so we say historical materialism. This is what that's kind of about. It's very difficult to look at a person and go, you are good and going to heaven, or you are evil and going to hell. It is much easier to look at the history of a situation and, like, what happened? Who benefited? Who did not benefit? Who was killed? Like, what was the birth rate? Like, what was the infant mortality rate? You know, things we can look at and actually know. Not like, oh, were they a good person in their heart or whatever the fuck. Historical materialism is like, let's look at the history. Let's look at the material consequences, effects, and conditions. That's what I'm trying to do. It's the reason I'm going through this. So then when we're making arguments later, you'll go, oh, well, yeah, they did do that in this year, so it would be not that crazy for them to do it again a few years later. Nicaragua. In recent weeks/days, the U.S. has done the following to punish Nicaragua for a supposedly bogus election they held. They've banned officials and diplomats from entering the U.S., and they have already passed economic sanctions. They had those sanctions ready to go before the election, by the way. Already seems weird. They knew the election was fake before it happened.
Oh
Brief history of the U.S. intervention in the country. This is what I can cobble together from, like, Wikipedia. And the reason I say Wikipedia, because Wikipedia is by no means a far left source. I'm not pulling these from fucking Stalinism.com or whatever the fuck. Like, I'm pulling these from Wikipedia. This is, like, generally accepted. People don't argue these facts at this point. At the time, I'm sure. But in 1909, the U.S. meddles in elections. To quote Wikipedia, in 1909, Nicaraguan President Jose Santos Zelaya of the Liberal Party faced opposition from the Conservative Party. These are just shorthand things. Led by Governor Juan Jose Estrada of Bluefields, which is a place, who received support from the U.S. government as a result of American entrepreneurs providing financial assistance to Estrada's rebellion in the hopes of gaining economic concessions after the rebellion's victory.
So to be clear,
end quote.
Just to point it out again, the rebellion in this case is the Conservative Party, and that is what got the USA backing. And this is in 1909.
In hopes of gaining economic concessions. The phrase banana republic, this is the era we're talking about. Various Caribbean islands, Central America. It's that, hey, you have stuff we want. It could be as simple as the Dole Corporation literally enslaving fuckers so they can work on banana farms. Or it could be a cobalt mine in the Congo owned by Elon Musk. Or it could be like this shit in Bolivia we want. They have a thing we want, even if it's just market share, even if it's just fucking McDonald's wants to have stores there. Someone wants to make money in a non-American country, and military force is used to make sure that happens in hopes of gaining economic concessions after the rebellion's victory. This isn't because America was evil or Satan or the devil. They wanted money. So isn't it great that we don't have to argue over whether or not fucking Taft was a piece of shit? Maybe he was. I don't know. This was done for money. They killed a lot of people. The U.S. occupied Nicaragua in 1912 and in 1927, both times to protect American business interests. Each time, a new puppet president was chosen by capital C capital, like the super rich people, like people in America. All of them either worked, not people in America, capitalists in America, the owning class.
There was no vote on this.
Yeah, there's no vote. They just fucking, all of them either worked directly for U.S. companies or were educated in the, like if you pull up whoever, blah, 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 president in 19 blah, 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 you pull it up, it's like from L.A., California, and you're like, oh, or like went to UCLA. And you're like, I wonder if they had any influence there. And I bring that up because in Cuba, the guy who the Castro overthrew, Batista, the Batista government, went to the U.S., educated in the U.S., sent back over as a guy to be president, specifically because they knew he'd be very nice to U.S. business interests. 1926, Nicaraguan Civil War. Yeah, all the fucking around eventually led to a civil war in a destabilized country where they were doing whatever they want to get money. President Coolidge in America lifts an arms embargo they had on Nicaragua so they can send guns to the side of the conflict that would benefit the U.S. the most should they come to power. They came to power. 1928. That was 26. So in 1926, Coolidge is like, okay, we want to kind of have some influence over who wins this Nicaragua Civil War, so we're going to give the side we like a bunch of guns. Where have we heard that before the entire Middle East? U.S. supervised elections in 1928. U.S. in quotes supervised elections. I bring this up because it's going to sound exactly like the opposite of what they said happened this month. U.S. supervised elections and U.S. control all the way up until 1979. Just like Cuba, they made them sign an article in their constitution that gave the U.S. complete economic control over Nicaragua.
That is utterly insane.
Like, they can just say, we don't want you to spend your money that way. We want you to spend your money building us a nice new port so we can ship our bananas or whatever the fuck Nicaragua had at the time. And the U.S. controlled Nicaragua all the way up until about 1979. So 28 to 79. Big gap there, right? Well, what if I told you that a single family controlled the Nicaraguan government for about 50 years? To quote from Wikipedia, for their more than 4 decades in power, the Somoza family accumulated wealth through corporate bribes, industrial monopolies, land grabbing, and foreign aid siphoning. Wow. The poor Nicaraguans for only $1 a day. Yeah, I'm going to keep that money. My name is blah, 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 Somoza Garcia, and that money is now mine. By 1970s, that family, that single family, that was 3 presidents, was stretched across 3 presidents, owned 23% of all land in Nicaragua. How'd they get there? Well, in 1934, the patriarch of that family lured a rebel leader who was against the family that eventually ruled for 50 years and stole a shit ton of wealth from Nicaragua. They lured a rebel leader, Augusto Cesar Sandino, into peace talks and then killed them.
Yeah,
a Game of Thrones move. Just come here. It won't be like, okay. Now at the end of this, I own 23% of the country.
I'm gonna read this 1979 part since.
Oh, and keep Sandino in your mind because they named the revolution after him.
Yes,
Sandino.
So in 1979, after 16 years of fighting, the Sandinista National Liberation Front overthrows the last Somoza asshole. I love that you wrote it that way.
You chose one where I have a ton of curses. So
I know. Somoza fled to Miami along with everything valuable he could get his hands on, and he left under $2 million in the national treasury. He was denied asylum in the U.S., which is amazing because it turns out they really didn't care about the person they installed. He was no longer useful to them. Fuck you. So he gets a mansion in Paraguay, and it was a SEAL team. What you wrote, he was SEAL Team 6th. He was assassinated by Sandinista assassins in 1980. They blew up his car with a rocket launcher. 6 of the 7 assassins escaped. The only one caught was executed for the attack, which killed Somoza, his driver, and his financial advisor.
It's really funny. The financial advisor just with him at all times, I guess. And this is in Paraguay. And now I don't condone tracking down and just murdering people, vigilante justice. But imagine if the same family for 50 years, they were a dictator. They were an actual dictator, just like a despotic dictator. Nicaragua was a miserable place to live. And then finally, you revolution that dude, and then he just gets a mansion in Paraguay. Then 7 people are like, fuck this. And they just, I'm not saying it's understandable to murder people, but
I mean, look, I as the resident pacifist here, I don't think you openly identify that way. I do. And as the resident pacifist, I go, I don't want anyone to die. And I look at that situation and go, there was a lot that man could have done to not incur a SEAL team to assassinate him.
Like not being responsible for the deaths of thousands and thousands.
Victim blaming is not at play here. If you are disproportionately the power and wealthy, then if you, in being powerful and wealthy, continue to perpetuate violence and worse as part of your life, that is going to come your way, regardless of how I, the pacifist, feel about it.
Look, if you smiled when Muammar Gaddafi, the previous guy who ran Syria, got knifed in the asshole until he died, you can smile at this.
Yeah.
Because everybody was pretty happy when Gaddafi got fucked up by his own people. Some of us got fucked up by his own people. Don't be such a ghoul. Don't kill so many of your own people. That
Don't
they
kill
decide
any
to
of
kill
your
you
own
back.
people.
Yeah, kill none of them, ideally. Ideally, the number is 0.
The Sandinista government rules until 1990. CIA-backed Contra fighters put constant pressure on the young government, as, you know...
This is a beastly quote from Wikipedia. You want to read it?
Yeah, I'm going to read this. So this is a quote from Wikipedia. In August of 1989, the month that the campaign began, the Contras redeployed 8,000 troops into Nicaragua after a funding boost from Washington, like American Washington, D.C., becoming, in effect, the armed wing of the UNO. What is the UNO in this context? I did mean to ask that.
That'd be the people who are currently ruling Nicaragua. Oh wait, sorry, I'm off by one. UNO is they are the rebels. We don't call them rebels. We call them Contras because that's
The Contras are the UN.
Yeah, basically private army funded by the U.S. sent in to destabilize the Sandinista government.
Kind of like some Blackwater stuff. No fewer than 50 FSLN candidates were assassinated.
Sandinistas. So, very important. We're about to talk about something similar to this. In this case, 50 Sandinista candidates were killed.
Like, actually.
Like, dead. Like, not you can't run. Not, oh, you have a fine.
There is a citation needed for the note that the Contras also distributed thousands of UNO leaflets. That's probably common to be expected then. Years of conflict had left 50,000 casualties and $12 billion of damages in a society of 3.5 million people and an annual, it says GNP, was that supposed to be GDP? Of $2 billion. The proportionately equivalent figure for the U.S. would have been 5 million casualties and $25 trillion lost. After the war, a survey was taken of voters. 75.6% agreed that if the Sandinistas had won, the war would have never ended. 91.8% of those who voted for the UNO agree with this. And then the Library of Congress Country Studies on Nicaragua
This
states,
is now a quote within a quote.
Yeah, quote within a quote. We're recursing. Despite limited resources and poor organization, the UNO coalition under Violeta Chamorro directed a campaign centered around the failing economy and promises of peace. Many Nicaraguans expected the country's economic crisis to deepen and the Contra conflict to continue if the Sandinistas remained in power. Chamorro promised to end the unpopular military draft, bring about democratic reconciliation, and promote economic growth. In February 25, 1990 elections, Violeta Barrios de Chamorro carried 55% of the popular vote against Daniel Ortega's 41%.
So, like, there is no alternate Earth that we can go and do an experiment on. But what they're saying, and this is Wikipedia, this is not a far-left media source, is that the general vibe was, look, the Sandinistas had a successful revolution from that one family that fucked us over for multiple generations. And then, for 10 solid years, the U.S. fucked them as hard as they possibly could. That's why that number is important. 50,000 casualties and $12 billion in damages in a society of 3 million people and an annual GDP of $2 billion. $12 billion in damages caused by the Contras, and their entire they make $2 billion a year as an entire country, the proportional equivalent of figures in the U.S. Imagine if in the U.S. somebody was messing with us, killed 5 million people, and took $25 trillion worth of resources from the current U.S. Holy Jesus.
Yeah, we would have nuked someone.
That would be crippling to us if we did not have the retaliatory capacity to, yes, nuke someone. It's like if somebody just came in and said, we've destroyed the entire state of New York. Like, well, actually, there's more people than 5 million in New York. The entire state of Arizona, it's a little closer.
Yeah. Well, hey.
I don't know if we have $25 trillion in Arizona, but... So the idea is that they had such unrelenting pressure that eventually the people in the country were like, look, we don't like these people, but if we don't vote for them, we fear that this conflict will last until the end of time. 75% of people polled after that war. That's what they thought. Word?
They were coerced?
Coerced by the other C word, capital. Like,
Well,
people, and this is all for money. This isn't ideological. This isn't like, we, America, want to go do freedom. I'm sure that's what they fucking said. I'm sure if you read an 80s newspaper, a 90s newspaper, that's probably what was said. If anything was said. I was alive in the 90s. You remember shit about Nicaragua?
No. I mean, maybe I learned.
Nope.
I don't know.
Don't even hear about it. We were doing a little Vietnam down in Nicaragua. Well, that's the thing, though. It's not American soldiers doing it. We just gave a bunch of money and guns to people.
All right.
Yeah. So when people say, like, give Cuba back to Cubans, like, we need to go back, give Cuba their democracy back, like, whenever they pretend that the various revolutions that brought countries like Bolivia, Cuba, Nicaragua, Vietnam, like, all happened because of economic exploitation. We fucked these countries until they were piles of ash, then they revolted, and now we want to go back? Like, to what? The U.S. installed dictator that they had, Batista in the case of Cuba, or fucking Somoza in the case of Nicaragua. I almost said Honduras. Of Nicaragua, like, is that let's bring it back to when 3 people in one family extracted resources and ended up with a quarter of a country.
Literal than what the tactic is, because let's address what the tactic is here at home. And it's not unique to our generation, but it sure has been leaned into in a way that's different. And it's the return to simpler times. Let's go back. The whole boomer energy that we have to deal with. Again, not unique to boomers. Happens almost every generation in some way, shape, or form. We're slowly getting the libs going, but the 90s. And then you have to whisper in their ear, pre-existing conditions were a thing you had to deal with in the 90s in what you're calling the best time ever. So you have an entire propaganda machine.
Yeah, do they mean the 90s or the 50s?
That is predicated upon, we have to go back. They have stopped caring or even looking into go back to what? The question isn't there. It's just a dictate. That's it.
If I take what they say as good faith, like especially Cuba, you hear the argument constantly. It's like, bring democracy back to Cuba. It's specifically talking about democracy. And if you talk to Americans, like, freedom for the people, and so they can determine their own fate. And then you just remember that, well, Cuba never really had democracy in American style, and the guy before who we had right now was a dictator. Same thing in Nicaragua. Like, technically, yes, the person was voted in. Like, America did not just show up and say, this is your new leader. Deal with it.
No, we had to kill a lot of people and cause damage
pressure
to get them to do it.
50,000 people. We just did terrorism at them, or funded, I should say, which is like exactly what we were doing in the Middle East. Like, it sounds like you could just replace Nicaragua with like 7 or 8 different other countries, and I could tell the same story. And this is why I have so much doubt when the newspaper tells me Nicaragua is having an evil, unfair, fake election. Because, like, the U.S. has been in charge of Nicaragua's elections in the past, and we saw how it went.
I mean, we ensured how it went, maybe, is a little bit more of a...
I mean, we funded...
Okay, there's this last segment, so I'm going to read it, and then, Pepper, you're going to have stuff to say.
Yeah, do it.
So, in the year 2000, electoral reforms broke up Nicaragua's 2-party system. And then, in 2006, after 2 losses, Daniel Ortega, president in 1990 and leader of the Sandinistas, won the presidency again. He's been elected 3 more times since then, most recently this month. His win percentage is increasing each time, 38% to 62 to 72 and then 75%. Sandinista policies continue to be extremely popular in Nicaragua, and the 2021 election had a 65% turnout rate, slightly higher than the U.S. 2020 presidential election. Exactly. One source says that turnout was actually 18%, which 18 is not 65. It's nowhere close. What?
If it would require such a crazy shift between elections.
And it's a dramatic change from previous elections as well. The source responsible for this cites a poll of 1,400 anonymous people.
And if you track the organization they're talking about, it goes to a Twitter. I'm not getting too far into the weeds. You can find this info if you want. It's like the Freedom for Nicaragua Corporation. There's like, it traces back to a rando Twitter account that we're pretty sure was made by people in Spain. Like, none of the Western media sources seem very concerned with hearing from Nicaraguans, much like how when you talk about Cuba, they don't seem very interested in hearing from Cubans unless they're people who live in Miami and were like left Cuba because there's a meme I like where it's like, my family was, they took our house, kicked us out of the thing. It's like, oh, you were slave owners, you were plantation owners. Like, yeah. Yes, you did get kicked out. That's what should happen. Imagine if we had a different end to the Civil War, and they're like, okay, the South if you owned a plantation, we're taking your shit, giving it to people, and you're gonna get a normal ass house to live in, or you can go to Canada if you are too freaked out by this. Like we could have had that at the end of. Actually, we started doing that. I just remembered the 40 acres and a mule shit. This is not U.S. history. This is Nicaraguan.
So a bit of U.S. context into something that was said was, why, to ask the question, what are all of the different reasons for why you don't see on the ground reports from Cuba or Nicaragua? And this is part of...
Except from Caleb Maupin.
What was that, Pepper?
Except for Caleb Maupin and a bunch of other people that the internet thinks are evil who are down there with cell phones just like fucking vlogging.
MSNBC, CNN, AB, why is our main news folks who are talking about these Nicaragua elections doing nothing? Now, we are always going to talk about, well, that doesn't serve capital's interest, but what else is at play? And the Imperial United States is very much built on a holier-than-thou mode of operation. So what is the narrative you're taught? I personally was taught a lot of this in grade school in that, well, the U.S. is so good and we have to go over there to help. That's the propaganda a lot of Americans are taught. The news doesn't ask the Cubans or the Nicaraguans what they want because the presumption is, well, how could they know? They've been slaves and destitute and had all of this bad stuff. We got to help them get to where they need to be so then they can do it. Like, that's the surface level reading that also goes in line with it. It's infantilizing of non-white, quote-unquote, third world people, that they are somehow not even cognitively on our level or anywhere close.
I try to think what newspapers would be saying if we go back to any of these other the other occupations. Like, what if we were reading the newspaper in 1926 and they actually ran a fucking story about Nicaragua? Like, what would they be saying? Probably exactly what they're saying right now. And then you talk about, we have to go in and help them. And then you remember that one family that controlled the thing. Yeah, we were sending aid, I say in air quotes, and they just took and kept it. Like, it's historical material. The cycles repeat. It's not that there's a evil cabal of people making evil decisions because, if we get enough evil in the world, then the great Satan will arrive. Like, it's for money. People want money. They know how to get it, and then they do it, and it keeps working. They just do the same thing over and over again, and as long as they have the power in the situation, they can just kind of take whatever they want. Nicaragua is in no position to fight the U.S., and then you start looking at, like, how come all these countries that don't like the U.S. have all these big, creepy militaries? And it's like, I fucking wonder why, man. Why would you?
Well, it turns out if you don't have a strong internal organized force, people sponsored by the United States show up and start murdering you and causing damage.
Kill 50,000 people and cause $12 billion of damage to your tiny, tiny country. All right, do we want to talk about today, I guess, the election that happened and what is being said? I wish I had more, conclusive evidence, but then the people, the things we're arguing against these claims have no conclusive evidence. So it's like, we're both just out here saying, I'm saying what I have figured out as just a rando on Earth. And the New York Times is saying, they have the resources to find out. They have the resources
to find out, and they are committing not only to something that isn't even well researched. Like, let's go with benefit of the doubt of that's all anyone had, and it's moment's notice, and that's what they went with. We don't even have a bullshit correction.
So some of the claims, I'll say them all, and then we'll So U.S. sources say that opposing candidates were jailed, that election turnout was actually only 18%, which would make the election pretty fucking illegitimate if less than 20% of people actually voted for the thing. Voter intimidation, and Ortega just is a dictator, and because he's been president for too long.
So the first one, read the first one again.
that the opposing candidates were jailed, and the easiest and first response to that is there were 7 parties on the ballot. One of them was Ortega, was the Sandinista party, because it's like they have a parliamentary thing where you don't vote for the guy, you vote for the, just like the England, you vote for like the Labor Party, and then this is the guy in charge of the Labor Party. So, like Ortega's in charge of the Sandinistas, so if the Sandinista party wins, Ortega's the president, and everyone knew that going in. There were 6 opposition candidates on the ballot with Ortega. So, what?
Well, I wasn't even getting into that. The people arrested, who were they? Why? That is easily found out and is a lie of omission that is still getting repeated.
Yeah, lay it on us. First of all, they weren't candidates. They were pre-candidates, whatever that is. And then what did they do, Dragon?
They were inciting violence and trying to disrupt the election.
Somebody said, so in 2018, there was some fucked up violence in Nicaragua. There was like a little coup attempt and hundreds of people. Was it hundreds? I don't remember. Was it over 1,000 people? It was many people died. Like we had our January 6th and, a handful of people tragically did die. Nicaragua had a kind of similar, well, not similar because many people died and there was just so much fire. It was an actual fucking coup attempt, like an armed military coup attempt, and it didn't work. And then there was a candidate who's like, I want to bring it back to 2018 and do it right this time. Imagine if a presidential candidate in the U.S. was like, Hitler was right and we're going to finish the Holocaust this time around. In America, nothing would happen and they would just be allowed to run anyway. But in Nicaragua, you aren't allowed to be. You get in trouble for that kind of shit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like that's what happens when there are, in fact, consequences to fucking with your political system because the people have more control over it and are like, we don't like that. Bye.
The same people who think January 6th was like the most fucked up, it's like 9/11 times 100 or whatever. The same internet left people like, we must prosecute people involved with the 6th. And I agree when it comes to politicians. Those same people will shit on Nicaragua for handing out consequences for that kind of behavior. Like, you know what I mean? Like, where's that disconnect? Because they don't look into it. They just go, opposition was jailed. What an evil dictatorship. They put essentially like they put a neo-Nazi in jail, the equivalent. What a fucking travesty. North Korea times 100. Okay, and then other ones, it was for shit like money laundering, which is code for they were paid by America to do some political subterfuge, and that is also not, you can't do that in the U.S. If you get money, remember how we're all pissed at Trump for Russia?
Yeah, but it is allowed because he did it, and here we are.
Yeah, there's no consequence here. But in Nicaragua, if you're getting funding and help from a foreign country to influence election, you as a candidate are compromised, you can't run. The rule is written in the U.S. that you can't do that. We just don't actually do it.
Wow.
Know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to. We are not Ortega. I am not like an Ortega.
I don't even know that much about.
I don't think like exactly. That's kind of our biggest.
I want to lean into.
If you look at
because this is the age of we have to put all of these disclosures and warnings in context, and unfortunately we have to, and that is. We are not conspiracy theorists. We operate based on evidence, science, reproducibility, and all of that. And in this situation especially, we are pointing to the fact that what little information is there is clearly propaganda. And not just in the way that, like, well, everything is propaganda. This is the greatest little phrase where there's smoke, there's fire. With almost no effort, us, average citizens, can go, hey, we think there's smoke over there, and go, oh, wow, they're just blatantly lying about everything. And then you learn about what happens. I want to jump into the guest that they had on that Peter Coffin podcast in bringing light to what does our system take against people trying to do a fair election compared to what we're demonizing Nicaragua for.
We watched it. I posted this in the, hey, if you're in the Patreon chat, I posted this, the video that Drag was mentioning. And if you want to find it, type in PACD, PACD, which is Peter Coffin's podcast. You don't have to like them. You can still think they're Hitler. But the interview we're talking about is We're Jealous of Nicaragua's Elections, featuring Andrew Saturn. And Andrew Saturn is who Dragor is talking about. They ran for a minor office in Washington State, right? They were like going to be on the board, like one of 3 board members on a utility district thing. It's a position that paid like $20,000 a year. You don't get Like it's not this is your only job kind of it's like a thing that like a rando lawyer or judge like does on the weekend because they're bored.
Right.
And Dragor, tell us about what kind of time they had, the hurdles.
So, and obviously jump in if I'm missing something important, but the biggest thing is this person ran openly as a socialist, which that is, say what you will, Bernie is kind of the only one that has made any kind of national traction with it that I'm aware of, and every other person that I hear of that uses that evil S word has things like the following happen. So other people on this board and in the election, everything involved once you have these positions are supposed to be impartial. You cannot...
Nonpartisan.
Nonpartisan is what I'm looking for, yes.
That's why he could run as a socialist, because you didn't actually have... It's a quote-unquote not... Like, that doesn't mean anything. Nothing's nonpartisan. It's a nonpartisan position, meaning you don't have to be, like, backed by a party or put, like, a D or an R next to your name. You can just say whatever the fuck party you feel like, and he walked around saying, I'm a socialist, vote for me.
Yes. You don't need approval from the DNC to get in for this position.
Who are not socialists.
Well, DNC, not okay. DSA, but anyway.
Oh, you said DNC, not DSA. Neither of them.
Anyway,
my statement stands.
These nonpartisan people were outright not just endorsing the other candidate, the incumbent, but were outright campaigning for them. They were engaging in things that were blatantly illegal in the state of Washington, and nothing happened.
And he's not talking about their political opponents. He's talking about he meaning Alex. He was talking about the like person who counts the votes in the county, like the elections commissioner, was campaigning for other candidates, which is,
wrong.
Come on.
Conflict of interest much?
Weirdly, you can't do that in Nicaragua. In Nicaragua, everybody, like, they just, you write your shit on a piece of paper, you fold it in half, you stick it in a box, and then when, like, the polls are closed, they just open the doors to, like, whatever building or thing you're in, and everybody can just sit and watch them count the ballots right there.
Yes.
Like, right in front of everybody. It doesn't go into a weird magic box that then whisks your vote away to whoever the fuck, with software made by whoever the fuck.
What was the claim that was rumor mongered and spread about him? Was he was sexist because the incumbent was a bought and paid for by the local water utility or some industrial company.
Yeah, the board he was running for, she like basically was paid for by the company that they would be regulating.
Yes, so
America.
There are people out there. I have met them. I'll call it lib shit or what have you. There's the if women ruled the world, then we wouldn't have all of these problems. And like, no, fuck you. That is still sexist for saying that. Like, just because women as a group of people historically on this planet have been disproportionately fucked doesn't inherently make them better or worse at doing any of these other things we need to do. It's sexist to say that. So this guy...
what you just said is sexist.
Yes.
To say that women would just be better because women are just born better because they're women. That's sexist.
Yes. So this person decided to run against a capitalist who happened to be a woman, and that immediately kicked off he's only running because he hates women.
Right.
And, like, this was a thing that was run. These stories were run in newspapers. And when he reached out to try and have an interview with the newspaper, they would decline. Like, they'd take everything that, to any of y'all listening, I'm assuming in some way, shape, or form, you are upset and or frustrated by what happened to Bernie Sanders, and you sit there and go, well, yeah, it's the DNC, and they have this structure to do that. And then you realize... this happens at the lowest levels as well. The opposition raised over $100,000 to run negative ads for a job that pays $20,000 a year.
It's such a little job, we can't even remember the exact name of it. It's like the Utility Control Board of blah, blah, blah county in Washington. It's not even a state position. It's a county position.
Just the smear campaigns were fantastic. And it wasn't just that there was active smear campaigns. It was also that every tool that we are told you are supposed to use to counter the smear. If you all have never read them in your American histories classes, Go read the op-eds that like Jefferson and Adams would write back in the day, and people are like, "Oh, it was so much more civilized back then." Like those motherfuckers could shit talk with the best of us. The slander in a campaign is older than this country. All right. But
my favorite one is there was a guy who claimed his opponent was dead and people believed him.
Yeah.
That was it.
So, like,
shit worked.
We're not saying it was better then, but what I am saying is back then, you would put in this crazy slanderous piece, and then the news would go run into the other person and go, "What do you got for us?" This person we're talking about here was completely shut out of any and all media attention for an open public election that was supposed to happen and needed to happen. So, like, when you say, "Oh, the system was rigged against Bernie," it's so much worse than that.
And it's not an evil... actually, with the Bernie one, the DNC, actually, there was a room of people who sat and talked and made a decision. But it's because they wanted the money. It's not because fucking Skeletor runs the world, or there's a shadow cabal of lizard people, or it's the Jews, or whatever. Like,
no, it's just money.
This is where the historical and the materialism become so goddamn important, because otherwise you end up just talking in circles about like morality and like, oh, but he did this and she did this. Or it's like, well, look at in the past what has been done by who and why. If you have just like 10 US backed coups in a row, and then on the 11th try to like, no. He's a dictator. We need to get in there and stop that dictator. You're supposed to go like, oh yeah, this time they're super serious. It's like, this time it really is a dictator, right? We 2 years ago had the whole Bolivia thing where I feel like I have deja vu here. They said the exact same shit about the Bolivian leader, and then he got like a mini coup, and then they had another election, and they just were like, no, fuck this, and they voted that guy's party back in. And now next year they say the exact same thing about Nicaragua, and I'm supposed to go, yeah. You see, Bolivia was actually fine, and they were bullshitting us the whole time, but Nicaragua, that's where the real, like, it's not that I think Ortega is Jesus. I just know I am being lied to by one side, and I would love to know what the actual reality is.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of where I am. I'm not Nicaraguan. I'm probably never going to go to Nicaragua. I'd love to. That'd be fun.
I mean, I want to see more
I want to go to Bolivia. I want to go to Bolivia more, but Nicaragua wouldn't be the worst.
Also, we do say this once in a while, but like we are talking about this only through the lens of elections, what the seemingly populace wants versus what moneyed interest, especially United States-based one, fucking with other countries wants. I don't know about the social sides of Nicaragua. For all I know, like, oh yeah, we do all this socialism and we're going to burn the gays. That's a thing that could happen. And of course I don't support that. But like, if you're only ever looking for the most perfect thing, you're getting fucked. You're never going to get there. It doesn't exist. So when Pepper and I and everyone else talks about we need to do stuff for the United States elections if we're going to have people believe in them, regardless of whatever other social stuff goes on in Nicaragua, we can point to the best of our ability right now, it seems like they actually have open and as fair as can be with the information we have elections. Like,
they had an election, they didn't like who won. That's it.
Yeah.
This is all for that.
And they didn't do digital
election,
shit
the
because
guy they
as
liked
every
didn't
technologist will tell you, digital shit is the greatest way to fudge numbers. Like, they did it analog. They had a system. They got their result. It was obvious. It wasn't contested. They don't have a two-party system, which, like, I'm most curious about that from learning about their election. Like, are they doing ranked choice? Are they, by having 6 people running, does that make it so only the most popular is gonna win? Like, I have more questions that aren't getting answered, and our media is failing us by design.
I'm not saying that only removing the two-party system would suddenly bestow a communism upon us, but holy shit, you look at the first election that Ortega was, because Ortega ran every time against this lady, just kept losing like all through the 90s. And then you look at the first election where there was more than just two parties, that vote got split right up. Ortega got 38%
yeah.
and won. Like, and then after that, it's like, oh shit, he was in power for 5 years, and I wonder why his numbers went up. Could it? I mean, it could be.
Okay,
that he,
wait.
politically games
I need to head
himself.
this off right here. To be clear, it is a human trait that the incumbent will continue to
yeah,
get
yeah.
more bias no matter what happens.
That's who he had to beat, was that same lady.
Well, but there are other factors in play, right? So if we count that first election, the first open one where he got 38% and his numbers went up, of course the numbers went up because he had to do good things and differentiate, but as like a researched study of humanity, that number was always going to go up, barring
Sure.
other things like he murdered a baby on live TV.
So I wish I had some frickin' easily citable, everybody agrees on it sources, but from what I can find, and to keep it, I don't know, relatively vague, I'm not gonna get too specific like numbers, but things that have been done, in Nicaragua, like the people's access to electricity has just gone crazy compared to what they had pre-Sandinista control. Literacy, infant mortality, life expectancy, healthcare outcomes, all the shit we keep talking about how we need to take care of in the U.S. And obviously they're at a much lower level than, they're probably about what the U.S. They don't have nearly as much money as we do. Nicaragua is a tiny country that is sanctioned and slapped around. Like, we have so many advantages, and you see what the U.S. When I say we, I mean the U.S. And you see what the U.S. does with those advantages. And then you look at a country like a Bolivia or a Nicaragua or a bunch of other examples, and you see what they have done with so much less. And it's like, do we really think that what Nicaragua needs to thrive is U.S. capitalist control and a Denny's? Is that what's going to do it?
I don't want a Denny's.
They seem to be making fucking progress. And they had the 50 years of U.S. control with that same family. They could have gotten, why aren't they a utopia? They had 50 years of the control that they supposedly want now, that the U.S. wants over them now. And look at where they were.
All the evidence points to his numbers going up because he is also doing those good things. But that's the reason the United States has fucking presidential term limits is because FDR recognized that fact of
let's say what we don't like about. I do want to say what I don't like about the Ortega. I think it is super weird that it's still Daniel Ortega.
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
Like, okay, you've been president for 25 total years.
Why does it have to be you, buddy?
His wife's the vice president. Weird. Why? You know what I'm saying? I don't think there should be only one. It's not that there's only one political party. There's a bunch. There happens to be the one party that 75% of the country votes for, and then there's everyone else who makes up the other 25% because they oppose the Sandinista government, the one that gets just the overwhelming majority of votes. If you were in Bolivia, it'd be the MAS, the Movement Towards Socialism, where they just get more votes every year. When they kicked out frickin' Maduro, I'm pretty sure his name Maduro, they kicked him out. I'm gonna accidentally say the president of the Philippines. Is Maduro the president of the Philippines or Bolivia? Let me Google this, and I'll edit this shit out. I don't want to say right now. It's Luis Arce Morales. Maduro is the guy from the Philippines, I think. Evo Morales was president of Bolivia for a really long time, and they were term limits dictator. And then he got there was claims from the UN that they had a false election, and then there was a little mini coup after. By the way, Morales is just have another election. Sorry, if you thought it was weird, we'll just do it again, and you can all supervise. And they're like, shut the fuck up. And then the military rolled in, so we got the hell out of there. And then his second dude, Luis Arce, is just the same party who they had another election, and he won even more than Morales did. And he's not technically an incumbent, but it's the same party because it's a parliament. You look at the patterns, and how can you deny them?
We have the tools here to make our stuff better, and this is kind of the refrain right now. This is preaching to the choir at this point, but to perhaps anyone who is listening to this and is new, the reason so many of us are frustrated is the promise was not just Biden, but the blue wave. Okay, well, we got it. We got the presidency, we got the House, we got the Senate. Not under ideal situations or numbers given how our Constitution works, but there's many things we could just do that protects the things we claim are important to us, especially elections. And zero of those things are happening. So when you hear someone say, I don't think we're going to get to what we want through electoral politics, how many stories, how many times do we have to live through in real time non-free elections happening? Because that's here. That's the United States. We do not have free and open elections. If that were true, we wouldn't have Citizens United. Citizens United being corporations are people in terms of free speech, and money is speech, and that's...
If that were true, we would still have net neutrality.
Yeah.
90 whatever percent of the country was like, we want net neutrality. I'm sorry. The system decided that the system looked at the material truth that they would make more money by getting rid of that. So they did it. It's not because they're evil. I think it makes them evil personally, but it's not because they're like, what would fuck government up the most? Let's do it for no reason. No, it makes them more cash. It gets them more power. It keeps other people out of markets so they can continue to have 2 fucking internet providers for the whole country.
And because a lot of these people are fundamentalist crazies, that is laying the groundwork for, no, you can't go look at queer stuff online. No, this is the groundwork for the Great Firewall of America. We point to the Great Firewall of China as being awful all the time, and we actively have, openly, you have the majority of the Republican Party supporting things like that because they always want to, they're full fasci. But then at the same time, you have the Democrats who go, well, we can't have everything be open and free. We have to be able to stop this terrorist thing. We have to be able to spy on all communications. And it's like, oh my fuck, they're saying the same thing just in different words to get the outcome they want.
Dragor, I don't know if you know this, but the guy who got rid of net neutrality, the head of the FCC, Ajit Pai.
Yeah, the most punchable face. If you're a tech person, you want to break your pacifism and break that guy's nose.
I don't know if you knew this, but he is Indian, so actually you are now racist because you didn't like the decision that a person of color made while in power.
Pepper, I am an anti-theist. I do not believe in sky cake.
Are you ready? Are you ready for when President Harris is running? And if you're like, we should have, and they'll be like, it is racist to demand that your student loans get taken.
Oh, God.
It is sexist that you want health care. You won't support our Yas Queen Girl Boss president?
Okay, so we're in the sardonic mode that I just accused the Peter Coffin shit of what I don't like.
That's why I kind of love the shit, yo. If you're just so tired, I'm just so tired. It's the only thing that keeps me going anymore. Because fucking, I get called, it's not all the time. I try not to wade into it to give people opportunities to yell at me, but I get a very small version of the same kind of shit where if I have opinions, they'll be like, your opinion is invalid because it did not, consider blah, blah, blah identity. And I'm like, yo, if every CAO in the entire country, if every president, general, and person in power was a trans lesbian and nothing changed about the system, that would not in any way have changed the system, would it?
And they're like, well, but these things would have been different. I'm like, okay, yes, I agree.
Maybe.
If we have top-down trans people in all of the important and moneyed spots, would being trans in the USA be a much better experience than it is today? Yes. I can just guess that. Yes. But you know what wouldn't
Dragor,
be?
if you're homeless,
you know what? There'd still be homelessness.
Exactly.
There'd still be cops fucking murdering people. So
ladies and everyone,
I keep interrupting. I'm sorry.
Ladies and ladies. No, it's because I was about to say ladies and gentlemen. I was going to say ladies and ladies only. This has been Last Minute Politics.
NBs and NBs only. This has been Last Minute Politics.
Half black, half Native Americans only. This has been Last Minute Politics. Let's get as specific as possible. Mitchell Temnis from area code 21385. This has been Last Minute Politics. Thank you personally for listening to this. I am Pepper Coyote.
I am Dragor.
We have many links just below in the description of this very podcast you're probably listening to. Email us. Follow us on Patreon. You can listen to these episodes being recorded live in real time, just like a few friends are currently. And thank you all for being here. Anything to plug? I'm gonna be at. By the time this comes out, the thing will be over. I'll see you at MFF.
Yeah,
if you're going.
MFF. I'm gonna do a Doom thing on Sunday, and we'll see what happens from there.
Bye.
Bye.